You are listening to the weekly Dartscast. 1 hour 90.
Hello and welcome to a new episode of the weekly Dartscast in association with Darts Corner. I'm Alex Moss, and alongside me back after his week off, it is the Darts statistician, still the Darts Strava King, Burton, DeWitt. Welcome back. How are you doing?
Well, I'm not going to be the Darts Strava King, at least for the next couple of days, because I injured my foot. Couldn't even stand this morning. Finally, now I'm able to hobble around. So hopefully I'll reclaim the title by this weekend. But otherwise, I'm doing fine. How are you, Alex?
I'm doing good, thank you, and glad to hear that the voice is still 100% and we can get you back in for this week. And a shout out to Andrew Sinclair for stepping into the hot seat for us last week. I owe him a pint of Guinness at some point, maybe next week. We'll see. Another busy show to bring you. We've got two guests calling in. You're going to see both of them on your TV screens this weekend, as they're going to be in the World Series of Darts finals in Amsterdam. Daniel Klose and Haupai Puha are going to be joining us during the show. But before we can look ahead, let's first take a look back. And this past weekend, it was the German Darts Open, the 11th Euro Tour of the year, and Krzysztof Ratajski lifting his second career Euro Tour title, first one since 2019 in Gibraltar. So for Krzysztof Ratajski now, looking at his 2023 resume so far, Players' Championship, check, Euro Tour, check, but how will this title winning form translate onto the TV for the Polish Eagle during the rest of the season?
It's tough to say. I think he's definitely underachieved over the last 5 years on television in the PDC, but I don't think he's been as much worse on television than on the Euro Tour and the Players' Championship events than a lot of people have said. He's certainly had a few matches where he didn't show up, but there's also been some barn burners where he's just not gotten over the line. And doesn't take that much to imagine a couple darts here and there going in a different way, and he's won a major already. He's not been that far off, but I think it is fair to say that he hasn't been quite as good on the television. And part of that is because he's been absolutely brilliant since even before he was a tour card holder, when he won multiple events, a UK Open qualifier, a couple Players' Championship events at the back end of the season. He won the World Masters over in the BDO when Glenn Durrant was still there before becoming a PDC tour card holder. Granted, of course, he qualified for almost every European Tour event. The only one he couldn't that year was the only one I was at, and so I didn't get to see him. He was at the other 12 that year, but that's just how good he was. And then he hit the ground running in the PDC, and now if he hasn't surpassed Mensur Suljovic, he's pretty close to being the most accomplished Eastern European player in PDC darts history. The one thing Mensur has going that Ratajski doesn't is that he won a major. He made the World Match Play final, on top of that, a European final, qualified for the Premier League. He's done a few more things on television, but he hasn't won as consistently as Ratajski has. He hasn't, and he didn't maintain it for quite as long. Mensur was at his best for 3 or 4 years. If Ratajski is now on his way back, we're talking still 6 years on. He's now threatening a much greater longevity in the upper echelon of the game than maybe Mensur Suljovic did. And if he keeps that going, he will, even if he doesn't win a major, surpass the Gentle as the best Eastern European player of all time. But he still needs to do something on television. And yes, he won this title, but he was not at his best. Granted, he didn't need to be at his best. He didn't average over 100 in any of the matches. He averaged under 90 against the player who had been the best player on the Euro Tour this year, or one of the two best on the Euro Tour this year, in Dave Chisnall. He barely cracked 90 against Danny Noppert. He was still in the low 90s in the final, but nobody pushed him. Nobody got within closer than 3 legs of him the entire time. And that includes, as I mentioned, Dave Chisnall. It includes Josh Rock, who, after I laid some low-level criticism on him, has come back into very good form since the summer break. So we don't know what Ratajski could have done if he had been pushed. Overall this year, he's still, top 20 in averages in the Players' Championship events. He's now solidified his positioning inside the top 32, inside the spots that are going to qualify. Well, he was going to qualify for the World Grand Prix anyway, but now pretty much guarantees that he's going to qualify for the match play next year. Yes, if he doesn't win another match over the next 12 months, he won't. But he has 30,000 pounds. It's probably going to be close to 50,000 next year that's going to require that's going to be required to qualify. But he did 60% of that, if not more, because this will be probably a little under 50,000. He did more than 60% of that this past week. Ratajski has definitely put himself back in that conversation of players who you don't want to draw. It wasn't that long ago that we were saying of the qualifiers for the World Match Play, he's one of the kinder draws. Last year at the back end as well for some of the television events. But that's just because he wasn't playing as consistently. He's still not at his best. He still has ground to improve. But he's now back in that top 16 of the Pro Tour Order of Merit. He's now back to making sure that he's going to be in all those television events like he's managed to be in. And he's now back in the winner's circle on the big stage. Is this now his time to push on? We'll see. But he's still a force in World Darts, and this weekend helped show that.
Yeah, that's an interesting comparison you made there between Krzysztof Ratajski and Mensah Suljovic. The title of the weekend for Krzysztof, that was his 10th PDC senior title. I think Mensah's on 7 or 8, but as you pointed out there, in terms of TV results, Mensah winning the Champions League, getting to some major finals, getting in the Premier League for a couple of seasons as well. For Krzysztof Ratajski, if he is going to surpass Mensah, if you like, his achievements in the PDC, we are looking at those events and saying, can he do what Mensah's done? Can he make a final? Can he win an event? And at the end of it, can he get in the Premier League? And there's still plenty of time for him to achieve those things. And what we can see from this year is, away from the TV events, he is starting to make that comeback. And you look at what Krzysztof's done in his career so far, and he did have that little spell, I want to say around 2019 to 2021, where he was probably closer than ever to lifting a major piece of silverware in the PDC. And the back end of that period, 2021, that year started with a quarter-final at the World Championships. He had big runs in the UK Open, the Grand Prix, the Match Play, the World Series finals. Some of the time he was coming unstuck, even when he was playing near or at the top of his game. I remember the UK Open quarter-final that he lost to Michael van Gerwen, and he averaged 104 in that game. And I think at one point he was in control of that game. He was leading, and he's a player that he was going into these major events, and I don't want to use the word solid because he was more than that. He was a threat to win these major titles. You'd expect him to average in the high 90s, the low hundreds more often than not. And I think back to some major events where he's kicked off a tournament. I think the Match Play a few years ago with a 107, 108 average, something in that region. So we know the game is there. Last year, we did see a little bit of a drop off. If you go off Darts Oracle, his year by year average, he dropped from 2021 to 2022 by 2 points. And at this high level in the PDC, that's enough to make a difference in your results. And we saw that he didn't really have many deep runs on the TV. But this year, 2023, that average is on an upward trajectory. We're seeing him win titles. And when you're winning titles, that's going to fill you with confidence and tell you that your game is heading in the right direction. And I think even before the run to the title this weekend, I think the fact that Krzysztof Ratajski was a seed for this event, it was the first time this year that he's been in the seeds for a Euro Tour. And we think back to that period I mentioned, and around that time he was a constant seed in these Euro Tour events. He hardly ever missed them. And this year he's had to go back to those tour card holder qualifiers. And when you're sitting at home after losing in them, seeing these Euro Tours go on, that can be hard to take. But he's pushed himself back in that Pro Tour top 16. Of course, a title at the weekend has put him back in there officially. He was the 16th seed as players dropped out at the weekend, but he's back in that top 16 on merit now. That's where he wants to be. And yeah, he put in some good performances at the weekend. His best was his first game against Ricky Evans, the 99 average. After that, you could see he was taking out some key shots at the right times, and there's signs that the Krzysztof Ratajski game is getting back towards near its best. He had a 68 on the ball to beat Dave Chisnell in one of the games. The game against Danny Noppert, I think there was an 88 on the ball in there as well. Against Josh Rock in the semi-final, 3-all, takes out a 1-2-6, and then has 3 legs in 5 visits to win 4 of those next 5 legs to pull away from Josh and win that one. And then in the final, you've seen the clip online that the 9 warm-up darts, Krzysztof Ratajski throws a 9 darter, kicks off the final with a 42, but it picked up again after that, didn't it? A 1-2-8 on the bull, a 105, a 12 darter in there. And that really did break the back of the game against Stephen Bunting to win it 8-3. And as far as where he goes from here, I wouldn't put Krzysztof as my top pick to win a major, but if he keeps up this form that he's on, then I wouldn't see him go on these deep runs again, get to a quarter-final, a semi-final, even a few of them before the year's out, because, as I say, he's winning titles, he's back in that Pro Tour top 16, and the confidence has got to be high after those runs.
Well, speaking of big weekends, it wasn't just a big weekend for the champion, Krzysztof Ratajski. Also won for Stephen Bunting, his first Euro Tour final in 4 years since 2019, pre-pandemic. Hard to believe there was a pre-pandemic. Do you think, though, this will push the bullet on now for the rest of season 2023?
Yeah, Mr. Bring Back the PDC, getting to a final. We almost brought back the PDC if he'd have won it. But for me, the thing I found most intriguing with Stephen Bunting's run at the weekend to the final, and this actually comes from his own website. It's not often I'm sat looking at the Stephen Bunting official website, but he does regularly post his own thoughts after tournaments, or someone writes it up for him. He tells him what to say. But I was interested to see his reflection on the weekend, and he said that it was the first time he was using his new 18-gram darts on stage in the PDC, and we all know Stephen Bunting as a player that uses, I think fair to say, that the lightest darts on the circuit, 12 grams, which incredible in itself. I think if I threw a 12-gram dart the way I throw them, I might not be able to find where it ends up. But for him, he was able to use those 12-gram darts for a long, long time, have a lot of success. But he has upped the weights, and we see players jump up a gram or two at a time. But Stephen, he's gone much higher. He's gone, well, in terms of his darts, half his weight. He's gone up from 12 grams to 18 grams. And looking at his results of the weekend, we have to say his second round game against Joe Cullen on the Saturday did ride his luck in that one. Joe missing 8 match darts. So if you give Joe Cullen 8 darts to win a match, it's very rarely that you see him spurn that opportunity. But Stephen ran with it. He won 2 more deciders against Andrew Gilding, Wesley Placier, who we saw equal the best run in a Euro Tour event of an associate member qualifying, get into the semi-finals. But Stephen Bunting, there was some great stuff in there. There was a 98 average, 6-1 demolition of Martin Schindler in the last 16. And that's a sign as well that he can hit those big averages on stage with these new darts. And now we are coming into that busy end of the season. Having a run like that so quickly with a new set of darts should give him a boost. And like I say, he had some fortune against Joe Cullen in the early rounds. But I think for me, the way he was able to seize that opportunity, make the most of that bit of luck, make the final, there's going to be more positives than negatives for Stephen Bunting coming out the weekend. And when you change your darts, we see it with players. They can be impatient. You want those instant results, and it's easily done. You have a bad match or two, or a few weekends go by and you don't see an improvement. It would be easy to go back to the old tried and tested darts that you've used before. But I think for Stephen Bunting having that run to the final, he feels that it's changing his darts, going up in weight. It's the last piece in the jigsaw, if you like, and he feels it's going to take him to the next level. And the hard work, I don't think it's done. I think it still remains to be seen if this was a one-off. You mentioned 4 years since the last Euro Tour final. If we see him start to make these runs more frequently and on the TV as well, then it's going to prove to be the right decision. It's going to give him that extra bit in his game that he's been missing, and we'll see if he can tear through the field and maybe win one of these titles, and we could be saying that Stephen Bunting is among the best players again.
Definitely. And if you look at his season so far, I think he's been better than the rewards he's gotten out of it. Obviously, this weekend he got some decent rewards. But so far this year, he's 22nd in the Players' Championships in averages, if you exclude the players who haven't played at least 10 events. That's pretty darn good. But since the summer break, 10 of those 16 matches, so more than half, he's been above his season average. And over the 3 events last week, or I guess a little over a week ago by the time you're listening, 6 of those 8, he was above his season average. So it seems like he's improving on what was already a fairly high standard. He's averaging just under 95 across the season, but he's been doing better than that in the last month. But now with that 12,000 pounds he got for making the final, he's now back provisionally in the top 16 of the Pro Tour Order of Merit at the end of the season. Of the players on the postseason Pro Tour Order of Merit, he's currently 16th, just ahead of Andrew Gilding, just ahead of Nathan Aspinall, just ahead of Martin Schindler. But that means he's still, he has to close out the deal. He has to keep going. And there's a few people right ahead of him he can reel in. Joe Cullen is 2,000 pounds ahead. Ross Smith is just 2 wins in a Players' Championship event ahead. So there's still room to pick that up. And getting into the top 16 at the end of the year, of that Pro Tour Order of Merit means that at the start of next year, he'll be seeded for these Euro Tour events. He's gone back and forth over the last decade between being seeded and not. But getting back in those seats, I think, is the key for him right now. But beyond that, will this push him for the rest of the season? I don't know if it will, but that's not because I'm not saying that he's going to keep this going. It's that I think he was already pushing himself. I think this just shows what he has been working towards. Yes, there were no highlight or huge performances, I meant to say, kind of like I said about Ratajski. But it was, again, every match was pretty darn consistent over the course of the weekend. That same thing I've been saying all year about averaging in those mid-90s. Okay, first match against Mickey Mansell, he was in the low 90s, barely better against Joe Cullen in the next round, but then 98, 91, 95 again, 92.5 in the final. Not that far off from the level needed to win. He never really was in the final. He fell 4 legs behind. He got a couple back. A couple times it looked like he would go. But as you mentioned, Ratajski always hit at the right times. And at the end of the day, Krzysztof was the champion. Bunting, yet again, fell short in a Euro Tour final. But he's still putting himself in that position, and he's playing good enough overall over the events so far this year. And I don't think this necessarily means he's going to push on from here. I think he's already in that push. And what should his goals be for the rest of the year? Well, obviously getting another title, I think, would be key. Despite how for now over a decade he's been in the PDC playing so well, he hasn't won as much as you might have thought. He's been in the business end of many events, including a pair of World Championships. He's been in the business end of other events as well, made a final of a World Series event. But maybe making another deep run on television in a ranking event is that next step to start pushing back towards that top 16 in the world. On his day, Stephen Bunting is still a top 10 player. The thing is, he's just not on his day enough. He's very rarely bad. He very rarely looks worse than maybe the 40th best player in the world. But he very rarely looks better than the 20th best player in the world. And that's about where he's ranked. This was a good weekend for him. Overall, he's having a very good season, even if quiet. It's just now getting into that winner's circle that has to be the next goal. And he's been pushing in that direction. This weekend is just more evidence of that.
Well, that was our look back at the Euro Tour. We'll be back in a few moments to look ahead to the World Series finals this weekend. But before we do, let's bring in our first guest. He's going to be making his debut in the World Series this weekend. He made a final in the Players' Championships last week. Here's our chat with Germany's Daniel Klose. I'm pleased to say I'm joined by one of the new PDC Tour card holders for 2023, Germany's Daniel Klose. Thanks for joining us, Daniel. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. How are you?
Doing good, thank you. And we're talking on a Tuesday evening, just 3 days before you make the walk in Amsterdam for the World Series finals for the first time. How excited are you to play in the World Series for the first time this weekend?
Yeah, I'm very excited. I want to enjoy my time there. Yeah, I will drive to Amsterdam tomorrow evening. I will pick up Martin Schindler, and I hope we will arrive safe there and then enjoy our time in Amsterdam. Yeah, I don't expect to win. I just expect to have a good time.
As this is the first time we've had you on our podcast, there's lots to chat to you about, and let's circle back to the very start for you in darts. How old were you when you first discovered the game?
Oh, I was 14 or 15 years old. We played at home at the weekends, yeah. In the summertime, we started to play in the gardens. You know, we had a dartboard at the tree, and when and it was not a let's say like a normal dartboard. It was more like a shooting board where the middle counts 10. The next string was a 9, 8, 7, and we used this one. And later on, we just played on the right board, and then we moved in to the house in winter time or autumn time and played there. Yeah, and it was very popular in my family. I played with my dad, my uncles, my cousins, nearly every weekend. Yeah, that's how it started.
Excellent. And from that point on then, were you hooked on darts and playing regularly, or have you had breaks from the game over the years?
Yeah, I had breaks. So I was playing dart inside then we switched to electronic darts because we are all lazy and we need somebody to count. And I played my first tournament, a pub tournament, was 15 years old. I was fourth, and a year later or what, my mom signed me into a steel dart tournament in an Irish pub here in Germany. And I didn't even have darts, but I borrowed me some from the owner of the pub, and I won the tournament. And that's how I started that. But with 16, 17 years old, here in Germany, there were no clubs around where you can play. So I stopped playing with 16, 17. Had other things to do, other things in head, girls, motorcycle, and all that stuff. I did not play for 4 or 5 years. And then I went back to play electronic darts for a long time and switched back to steel dart, let's say 5 years ago, to play it more constantly, because a club opened up nearby where I live, just 10 minutes away. And I was there every weekend, and I practiced it a lot, and I was getting better and better and better again. Maybe I should do it 15 years earlier.
Well, I mean, you mentioned it there, the coming back into steel tip darts in the last 5 years, and we look at the dart scene in Germany. We see the PDC events, the big crowds. We see players that have come through before you, Max Hopp. You mentioned one earlier, Martin Schindler, Gabriel Clemens. It looks like the game is really taking off in Germany. So how has the dart scene changed in the last 5 or 10 years since you went back into it?
Yeah, there are much more players, and even the level of play is raising. I would say, let's say 7-8 years ago, if you play 18 darts, you would win every game. But now that's not good enough anymore. Yeah? You have to play 15 and better to win games. In Germany as well. Last year I tried to qualify for a few European Tour events on the host nation qualifier, but I could not qualify for one.
Well, one event, one Euro Tour that you did qualify for was in 2019, and for many darts fans, that was the first time that they'll have seen you play, was that Euro Tour in Sindelfingen 2019. You won through the host nation qualifiers the day before. On the Thursday night, the next day you were up on the stage. So what was that experience like?
Oh yeah, I was very nervous at this day. Yeah, and that was my first qualifier I ever played. I ever played the first ever PDC tournament ever, and I got through the qualifier, and I was very, very excited up there on the stage, and I was 3-1 or 3-0 down against Keegan, and I came back to 3-3, and I guess there were, I don't know, 3,000 people in the venue, and they were starting to sing my name, and it was overwhelming, goosebumps, and it was a strange but nice feeling.
Sounds like a special moment, and I guess that moments like that will give you the urge to want to get that more. And so we see you go to Q School in 2020. We see you in the German Super League as well, and I wanted to mention that German Super League in 2020 because it's probably one that no one's going to forget. It was one of the first events in person darts to come back during the pandemic. We were all watching it because it was the only darts on it at the time, and we all remember the infamous Lollipop Man as well. So what can you tell us about that, playing in that tournament?
Yeah, playing in that tournament was it was also a new experience for me. We already had one weekend, but that was then afterwards skipped and cancelled, and we did this tournament in May and June on the Super League, playing on TV. It was very, very long days. It was very, very, very hard days, 7-8 hours, waiting 3 hours on a game, doing 3 games a day, a lot of waiting time in between. The flow of the game was slow. Yeah, I know I'm a slow player, but even for me it was very slow with the stop and go, and you always have to watch at the lollipop man. Can you walk now or not? So that was really strange. Yeah. But But on the other side, I won my group there, and I was totally surprised about that. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you had a great run on your debut, getting to the quarterfinals, and the next few years we see you go to Q School, and last year you got to the last 8 on one of the days, and after that we see you get a little taste of the Players' Championship events last year, playing in a couple of them. So what were those few days like, being in a room with all those top players and being in those events yourself as one of the 128?
Yeah, the first time I can remember that was in Niedernhausen in Germany. Yeah, I was there. I was I was just looking around, trying to suck what the people are doing here, to see how do they behave, what are they doing, whatever. I was more watching than thinking on darts, seeing them all live. Then I played, my first game was against, it was Steve Lennon, I guess, and he was really good playing, and I lost that 6-1 or so. And the next day I was playing Brenton Dolan. I can remember that good, because the first time playing against the professionals on a professional tournament, that's something special, yes.
All good experience, and last year we saw you gain a lot of experience as well, playing on the Challenge Tour. You had a couple of quarterfinals, a semi-final, and also here in the UK the Modus League has took off, and you were involved in that as well. So how much confidence did that give you heading into the German Super League last year?
Yeah, that gave me a lot of confidence, but I was a bit unlucky in the semi-final against Florian. I did really good, I guess. I find I did good on the Super League, but it was super close, and in the semi-final and in the deciding leg, I just couldn't hit any treble. So maybe it was the kind of mind game before on the stage between Florian and me, but maybe it was that I couldn't hit treble anymore in the decider, but I felt I played good all the tournament. Just had one bad leg.
Yeah, it's a great run, and going in the first stage of it, 10 out of 10 in the group is pretty remarkable. And then we move on to this year, and quite a long break between the Super League and Q School, around 2 months or so. So was there a lot of practice in that time? Did you try and play in a lot of local events? How did you prepare for Q School this time around?
I played a lot at home, and I only train or do my practice in our club or once a week, and local tournaments I don't play normally. Little tournaments because I also want to spend time with my girlfriend and all that stuff, that's playing small tournaments for me is too much time consuming, and I better train at home and do my 2 hours or 3 hours and have some more time going to a local tournament and staying there all day long, making 5 games in 10 hours. I think that's not efficient.
No, that's fair enough, and it's Q School that's got you all those professional tournaments on the PDC circuit to play on this year and next year at least, and it was a memorable week at Q School, making the last 8 on days 2 and 3 of the final stage. You finished 8th on that final order of merit to win that tour card. Can you remember the moment you found out that you'd done enough to earn a card?
I can remember it really good. I was nearly crying because I got my 7th point, because I knew it would be enough, and I couldn't believe it. Really, it was crazy. That was the game against it was, I guess, Alex Spellman or whatever. I'm not sure 100%, but I guess it was Alex Spellman where I won my 7th point, and after that I was overwhelmed, because normally nothing should happen after the 3rd day with 7 points. But it was close then at the end.
So how much did winning that tour card affect your life outside of darts? Have you had to juggle that with work? What's your current situation? Are you full-time with the darts, or are you still working as well?
I'm full time with my job, and darts is let's say side business. No, I'm a manager of 2 departments of a company. We are manufacturing packaging for cosmetics like mascaras, lipsticks, lip gloss, and stuff like that. And I'm still full employed. I'm working I have a good deal with my employer, and I can take off for the tournaments, and so that's good. So I'm doing 8 to 5 every day, unless I play darts.
Good to hear that you've got a deal with your employer. And I guess, given the announcement yesterday when we're talking for the 2024 calendar, all Players' Championship events are going to be held midweek. I guess you're going to have to arrange a new deal, get some different days off next year.
For sure, I was checking out how much vacation I need to play all the events already today. Yeah, that's a lot. That is changing the situation, I guess, for a lot of players at the Pro Tour, because I guess there are still many people who have a job beside dart.
Let's get on to your season so far then. It's your first as a tour card holder, and many people would have stopped to notice you last week with that run to the final in the Players' Championships. But an early result from the year, which I'm sure would have pleased you, was beating the world number 1, the reigning world champion Michael Smith, back in March. What did that win mean to you? And 101 average as well to do it.
Yeah, that was anyhow, as I saw the draw, I was a bit angry. Again, a seeded player, I thought. Just give your best, and then I won. I was overwhelmed and couldn't really realize it at all. Oh shit, I won, And the match start I hit was also difficult. I can remember the last leg really, really good. I was on 132 after 12 darts. He was on 158. I was throwing bullseye, and 16. I missed the double 16, and he was throwing 60, 60, and the 19. So and then, then I had the double 8. The first one was on the wire, and the dart got stuck up, and I had to move to the right side. But the second hit then was great. Anyhow, I was lucky also. Yeah.
a great win, and let's come on to last week then, because we've seen you make that huge step forward, getting to a final. But before then, your best run had been the second round on the floor, the first round on the Euro Tour, and we've seen you lose some tight games this year as well, getting close to that third round in the Players' Championships. And even the day before your final, you lost a close one, 6-5 to Raymond van Barneveld. So how are you feeling going into that day that you made the final? Did you feel like a run was coming?
I felt I can go over round 2. Yeah, I can do that. It just was always I missed the doubles, and on this day, on this Tuesday, I was hitting them all day long. So that was really good. And also I have received new darts. 3 weeks ago I was playing them the first time this last week in Barnsley. And they are feeling really good, and I have a really good touch. Also in practice, I recognized already, oh yeah, they are flying good. They're sticking good. I have a good feeling. I will do, perhaps, for sure, I will do better in the second half of the year than it was in the first. But that it would go through the final, I wouldn't expect that. But it was a really, really good run. I felt really, and the special thing really was, I was really tired in the morning because I didn't sleep very well the night before. But anyhow, this maybe switched off the brain and I just played darts.
Well, you mentioned that you got new darts 3 weeks earlier. We should give a mention to who made them. Who is the manufacturer that produced those darts, and what were the changes that you made to your previous setup to your new darts?
It's not a big change. Just the grip is a bit different. The weight is nearly the same, and the manufacturer is my sponsor is Carella, and they were let's say, developed and manufactured in the UK. And I have received them, and sooner or later they will go onto the market. So I have used the prototypes to play the tournaments. Everything went well. It was really a long process to get there where they are now, because I have received a few prototypes, but I feel really confident with the current one, and they will go into serial production. Let's say at least end of this month, beginning of next month.
Good to hear. Well, the run to the final is put you in contention for the World Championship, and the dream for every tour card holder is to play at Ali Pali. So what would it mean to you to finish off this first year on tour with a trip to London and to play in the biggest event there is in darts?
Yeah, that would mean everything to me. That is where a dart player wants to play, to feel the atmosphere at the Ali Pali. Really, I would do everything to play there. That I guess everybody wants to play there. So really, I hope I can make it. I know that's still a way to go, but I feel confident that I can get it. So I don't know. Last week, it was the first time that I was watching rankings, because I did not so well before, and thought, okay, I'm so far behind. And the week before the tournament was in Barnsley, to have a chance, I was talking on a practice evening. I was talking to a buddy, and I said, if I want to really have a chance to Ali Pali, I need to win a tournament. And then I run to the final. Yeah, crazy. Yeah, crazy.
That was a good prediction, almost coming off. And lastly, we see players every year get a tour card, and some of them, they do struggle to begin with to find their feet and get results, and it can be a difficult time. But for you, you're now getting results. How did you keep yourself going during those first few months when you were losing those close games, going out of events early? What got you through that period?
I really don't know. So maybe it's the new dart, new thinking, the brain feeling more confident with a new dart, being more, let's say, loose, taking it more easier, not so serious to perform. I really don't know. As long as it works, it's okay for me.
Well, it's been a great start with the new darts, getting to the final last week, qualifying for the World Series finals. Daniel, it's a pleasure to chat to you. Congratulations on those achievements, and we wish you all the best for this weekend in Amsterdam and for the rest of the year as well.
Yep, thank you very much. It was also a pleasure for me to talk to you, Alex.
Attention all dart enthusiasts, this is ZR, your host from In the Mud Sports, and I have an exciting announcement for you. Are you ready to take your darting experience to the next level? Introducing In the Mud Sports, the premier online darts league for amateurs like yourself. We're not your typical darts league, it's an experience like no other. It's where you can showcase your skills, make new friends, and have an absolute blast. We have a vibrant community where camaraderie is key and darts meets pure enjoyment. Whether you're a singles player or love the excitement of team events, In the Mud Sports has got you covered. We are perfect for amateurs who want to have fun and improve their game along the way. It is your time to shine. Don't miss out on this incredible opportunity to elevate your darting experience and join 80 plus players from all around the world. Together we'll create unforgettable moments on and off the oche. You can catch all updates about where we are going live next through Twitter and Instagram at In the Mud Sports. See you guys there.
Thanks again to Daniel for joining us now. Our own look ahead to the World Series finals. The draw is out for Amsterdam, but which first round and possible second round ties are most likely to keep you indoors watching on Friday and Saturday night, and for you, Friday and Saturday afternoon?
Yeah, I was going to say, I'll still be able to have my Friday and Saturday night. That's one of the advantages of living in the U.S., although having spent the last week on the West Coast where the evening session was starting and it was still morning time, that was a little weird for me. So I'm glad to be back to my normal of a morning and afternoon session instead of a morning and another morning session. But there are some interesting ties here. I only picked out half of the first round ties, so you can say the other half. But no, I'll just say a couple of the ones I picked out. Starting with, I think, what is the standout tie. I would be surprised if you didn't pick it out as well, at least of one of yours, because I think it's obvious that it's one of the best ones. Dirk van Dijvenbode against Danny Noppert. Dirk has been threatening for some time now to win his first stage event. Obviously had those missed match starts in the final against Gerwyn Price on the Euro Tour earlier this year, but he's been in position in many other events. But Danny Noppert, of course, has won a major, and Danny Noppert has been so far this year, I guess I've been using quiet a bit. I don't know if you can call it quiet when you've won a title, but has quietly been having yet another pretty good year. He's made the final session of 5 of the Euro Tour events, in addition to that Players' Championship title, but he hasn't played his best on television yet. But I don't think that'll matter in this one. I think this will be a really tight match between two players who could win the title if they find their best stuff. And you mentioned Saturday night. Have to throw out the winner gets Nathan Aspinall. Only just won a televised event back at the end of July at the World Match Play. So both of those matches, whether it's Dirk or Danny that comes through that and make the second round, I think will be just an absolute class match. But I'll mention 2 other first round ties as well. You know, you're hearing from Daniel Klose on this week's show, qualifier for this event, had by far his best run in a Players' Championship event last week. Only makes a final, but he gets Krzysztof Ratajski. I don't know when's the last time we talked about Krzysztof Ratajski. Just 20 minutes ago, because he won the title this week. That's a tough draw for Ratajski to go against someone who's clearly in form. And again, mentioned Klose had to go through the qualifiers here, so it's not just one big day that he had. He had multiple because he came through a qualifier as well. And the reward. Only one of the best players in the world, number 2 on the Pro Tour, Luke Humphreys, in the second round. Either of those will be a very tough matchup. And I'll say one more that might not appear as sexy on paper, but I'm looking forward to it. Gabriel Clemens against Willie O'Connor. Yes, Willie O'Connor's not been at his best this year. He's right in the middle of the pack in averages. But there's maybe just some signs that he's starting to find his best starts again. You know, for the first 6 months of the year, he only averaged over 100 once in a Players' Championship event. He did it twice in the last couple weeks, and he came very close in another match to doing it against Ross Smith, which he won. So he's playing, if not more consistently, at the very least, he's finding his best darts more often after what was really a regression for the first 6 months of the year. Gabriel Clemens, I don't need to say much more about it. I think at this point he is one of the 2 or 3 best players in the world who somehow has never won a title. He's made televised finals. I think, though, that's a very interesting matchup and one where Willie O'Connor has got to be feeling like he has a chance the way he's playing right now.
Yeah, some good picks there. And I've got to say, I'm just pleased that the draw is out for this event, because I was putting together the spreadsheet yesterday. The draw hadn't been out, and it's always difficult to pick out some first round ties that we're most looking forward to when we don't have the draw in front of us, but we do. And yeah, I think you're spot on there. The tie of the first round, I'm with you on that one. I'm most excited about the Dirk van Dijvenbode, the Danny Noppert game. I think that should be fun to watch. 2 Dutchmen playing against each other in front of a Dutch crowd, and it is a clash of styles. Dirk, as we've said before, wears his heart on his sleeve. You're going to know exactly how he's feeling during the game, whereas Danny, a bit more reserved, but we do see him from time to time give it the big one. But I think usually he's quite a laid-back character, but that's the tie I'm most looking forward to. And I think one of the plus points with this event is that we do get to see players that aren't regulars on TV. This event, 24 players, 8 of those spots go to a World Series Tour Card Holder qualifier. And you've got a few of those names that we're going to see this weekend. One that we've just heard from, Daniel Klose. I think it is his TV debut, unless you count the Modus League. But it's a big moment for him. He's just made that final last week on the Pro Tour, and then he's come through the qualifiers to get here. So it's a milestone for him. He gets to play on that big stage in front of the cameras. Also going to see 2 players go up against each other, Graham Usher and Haupai Puha, the other guests that we've got on this week, 2 that you don't see regularly on TV all year round, and as luck would have it, they are facing each other in the first round. So I think both of those players are going to be looking at that tie going, what an opportunity to get through to that Saturday afternoon for you, Burton, and go up against one of those 8 seeds and one of the big names. But going back to the first round ties that I like the look of, and another one for me, Damon Heta against Ricky Evans. And okay, a lot of people will be looking at that game going that Damon Heta will be the favourite. He's a top 16 player. He's won titles on the Euro Tour. He's won the World Cup. He's won a lot in the game in a short period of time. But for me, whenever I see Ricky Evans on TV, you always see him and think there's a player there who is absolutely loving being on that stage. It is his job first and foremost. He wants to win to make a bit of money and to earn a living. But I think for me, the thing that comes across is that he has got that real love for the game and he enjoys it. And we might see an interesting walk-on from him. I know we've had Damon Heta taking over that mantle this year with all his random walk-ons, but Ricky Evans, especially during the World Championships and sometimes on the Euro Tour, he does bring out something special as well. So maybe we could see a battle of the walk-ons there in that Friday night game between those two. And just lastly, in terms of second round ties, you mentioned the one between Nathan Aspinall and either Dirk van Dijvenbode and Danny Noppert. I think the other ones that stand out for me is Michael Smith. He could possibly go up against Raymond van Barneveld in front of that Dutch crowd. So you've got the world number one, the world champion against, as Rod Studd would put it, the doyen of Dutch darts. And if both players are on form, that's an exciting game to look forward to. And especially if they produce the sort of game that they had in the Grand Slam last year, I think the semi-finals. So that'll be an interesting one. And then just lastly, Dimitri van den Berg. If it is Damon Heta that wins that game, him and Ricky Evans, I'm not sure if they're still housemates or Dimitri's got his own gaff now, but if it is those two against each other, that should be an interesting tie as well.
Well, we'll see on either Friday night or Friday afternoon and Saturday night or Saturday afternoon, depending on, or, if you're watching from Australia, Saturday morning or Sunday morning. So we don't want to leave anybody out here. But it's prediction time. We haven't done that many predictions recently, because when we do make predictions, it makes you wish we don't. But we're going to do a prediction now. Who makes the final and who do you think will be lifting the trophy on Sunday night / afternoon / Monday morning?
Yeah, here we go then. And before I get to my picks, just want to give a shout out to our partners, our friends, Darts Corner. Go and check out their social channels because they're running a competition to win a signed Darryl Fitton shirt. All you got to do is predict who the two finalists are going to be this weekend. So we're actually going to give you some inside tips here, me and you, Burton, because whoever we give out the names of, not to back them, given our track record that you mentioned there on the show. But I was having a look back at the history of this event. It is still quite a new event on the calendar for the PDC. And Michael van Gerwen, he did dominate the World Series finals in his early years, 2016 to 2019. He won 4 of the first 5, James Wade winning the other. But since then, it's been the Welsh show. We've had Clayton Price, the last 3 winners of this event. But the one thing that I found interesting is that there's been a different runner-up in each of the last 7 years. And you think of this event, you've got the first 2 rounds, including the last 16 when the seeds come in. It is that short race to 6 legs. So we have seen in the past that the seeds have come unstuck in that first outing on the Saturday. So you wouldn't bank on all 8 seeds being involved in the quarterfinals on Sunday when the format does go up to the first to 10 legs. And I mentioned the previous winners of this event. By the time they'd all won it, they were already established winners in the PDC. They'd won TV titles. But you look at the list of runner-ups, Peter Wright, the first couple of years, he hadn't won a major yet. Michael Smith, 2018, he hadn't won a major yet. Danny Noppert, 2019, he hadn't won the UK Open. And Dirk van Dijvenbode last year, still yet to win one. So this tournament's threatened to be the platform for a player to have their first breakthrough moment on TV, win a major title, if we're allowed to call it that. And it's not quite happened yet, but I think that changes this weekend. And I'll start off with the bottom half of the draw. I'm going to play it safe on this one. I'm going to go with the highest seed, Gerwyn Price, the defending champion. I know there's some tough potential opponents in his half of the draw, but I think he's going to come through that and get to the final. So the top half, this is where I'm going to say we're going to see that breakthrough moment. And I think it's going to be the weekend for Luke Humphries. We've predicted him before to win these major titles. So it's Humphries Price finale. And I've already said, spoiler alert, who's going to win it. We are going to see a new name on the trophy. And with Luke Humphries, he's had success on the floor, the Euro Tour. This is when he makes that next step, wins a big one on TV. So I'm going to go Luke Humphries, his first year playing on the World Series, go back to January when he was playing in Bahrain and Denmark. He's going to cap off the World Series season by winning the finals. And I think he beats Price in the final. And then we're going to have that social media debate all of next week. Luke Humphries has won a big title, but is it a major? That's going to be the talk all of next week.
Well, I fully agree with you that there will be talk next week about whether this counts as a major and therefore whether it counts as the first major champion for one of the players who we've been waiting so long to break through and win one. I just don't agree with you on which player that's going to be, because I'm going Dirk van Dijvenbode. I said earlier this year he would win an event on stage. There's only a couple Euro Tour events left. There's only more than a couple majors left, but not that many more. And I'm doubling down. I think he will win, and I think this will be his weekend. And if it is, he'll have earned it, because it means he'll have beaten Danny Noppert, a UK Open champion. He'll have beaten Nathan Aspinall, a UK Open champion. He'll likely have beaten Gerwyn Price, although Gerwyn Price could go out in his first match. Gerwyn Price is not a UK Open champion, but he has won a couple other events, including, a world title and, almost everything that when he's this year at some point or another, I don't know what I'm trying to say, but he's been winning a lot, and he's probably been the best player this year. But I think Dirk van Dijvenbode is ready, and I'm picking him out of that bottom half. Who's he going to beat in the final? That top half is tricky. I could see this being Luke Humphries' week to finally make the final, but he's going to have to beat an informed player in his first match in either Daniel Klose or Krzysztof Ratajski. Also in the top half, Rob Cross, who just won a pair of World Series events. Johnny Clayton, who's starting to come back towards his best. Michael Van Gerwen, who hasn't been consistent, but has been pretty good as of late. Also won the Premier League this year. And Dimitri Van den Berg, who's made a final this year in one of those World Series events. Damon Hedda as well, playing some of his best darts. The top half is really difficult, and that's part of why I think it's not going to be Luke's week. I think he's going to get tripped up, especially at a shorter format. That's where Ratajski will pounce, and I think he goes out that first match, but I'm not going Ratajski to make the final. I'm going to go Rob Cross to make yet another World Series final, but this time he'll lose. This time Dirk van Dijvenbode will win his first big stage final, will win his first major, if we can call it that. Well, that's for next week to decide. But I agree with you, it will be a first-time televised winner. I disagree with you on who.
Well, those are our picks for the World Series finals this weekend. And let's get to our final guest on this week's show, a player that will also be disagreeing with the picks that we've just made, because he is going to be playing in the World Series this weekend. Here's our chat with one of New Zealand's top players, Haupai Puha. I'm pleased to say I'm joined by one of the top players in New Zealand. He's going to be playing in the World Series finals this weekend. Haupai Puha, thanks for the time, Haupai. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm good, Alex. Arrived in Amsterdam yesterday and slowly getting the body clock ready. Another day and I should be all right. A little bit of a zombie at the moment, but I'm getting there.
Well, glad to hear you're getting there, and it's been a little while since we had you on the show. Way back in December 2020, you'd come over to the UK early from New Zealand ahead of your debut in the PDC World Championships, and I know it didn't go according to plan. It was an unusual tournament being played with no fans, but what was the whole experience like getting to play at Ali Pali?
Yeah, it was obviously different to watching it on TV with no crowds. The COVID debacle that we had, but I watched the replays, and it wasn't a pretty performance from myself, but I learnt a lot from it.
And I remember you saying that the plan was to stay in the UK for Q School start of 2021, and we saw you do that, get to the second stage. What did you take away from Q School? Did it make you more determined to get that tour card and get on the tour?
Yeah, it's very tough coming from all the way over here. We do have the talent to get a spot, so there's a bunch of guys in New Zealand and Australia that have the talent, but we just don't have any tournaments to prepare us for it. We all of our tournaments in New Zealand have section play or round robin, so nothing is straight knockout. So it is a different game, a different preparation, and I guess the closest that we do get to Q School is playing the World Series.
Obviously, looking back at the last couple of years, we've seen a lot of events come back, including the World Series in Australia and New Zealand. What's the dart scene been like back home these last few years? Has it got back to how it was pre-pandemic? Have you got more events to play in now?
Yeah, all the ranking events in New Zealand have gone back to normal. We have, for the PDC side, we have 12 ranking events. For our Ali Pali spot, we have a top 16, which is the last time it's going to be played this year, top 16 playoff, and then the winner goes to Ali Pali. Next year, it's going to be whoever's ranked number 1. So, but yeah, apart from that, everything's back to normal in New Zealand.
Good to hear. Well, last year we saw you make a lot of strides, winning titles, making deep runs. I think back to the finals in the Australian Open, the Pacific Masters, the Challenge Tour as well. We saw you win on that World Series stage. So just looking back at last year as a whole, how important was it for you in the career and your progress that you've made?
Yeah, I felt like I wanted to go to Q school, but then I felt like I peaked mid-year. And when it came down to the sacrifice, the time and money at the end of the year, I didn't quite have the form that I had during, the New Zealand Championship, the Aussie Open, and then the World Series events. Peaked at the wrong time. But last year was good. One of my better years.
Definitely, and we did see you in Q School last year, 2022, and that meant you were eligible to play on the Challenge Tour. As I say, you got to a final in that, and we know the sacrifices you've got to make coming over from New Zealand. So did you ever think that run to a Challenge Tour final, you'd end up getting a spot in a Players' Championship a few months later?
No, it did not cross my mind at all. I was still at Lakeside, and on the Friday I was watching some events and had a couple of beers, and the reception at Lakeside isn't very good, so I left my phone in my hotel room. And then when I got back, it was about 10:30, and I had all these missed calls. And so I rang, and it was Graham. He said they had a spot for me, and I was obviously in Frimley Green, and I had to make it all the way to Barnsley by 10 a.m. So I tried to make it happen. Unfortunately, got on the wrong trains and missed trains, and I got to Barnsley about 11:30, so I missed Saturday. I was going to catch an Uber. It was about £600, but in the morning it wasn't available, so I had to try and go the train. But I played on the Sunday, got my first start in the Pro Tour event, but I drew obviously Barney again for the third time, and it was the third result exactly the same. I got beaten quite comfortably, but it was a good experience nonetheless.
Well, speaking of playing against the big names in darts, we had the World Series come back last year, and you produced one of the best performances that we've seen from you on stage, a 95 average to beat Johnny Clayton. So how much confidence does a win like that give you?
Yeah, it was like at the time, I couldn't believe it. We watched these guys. We watched the pros on TV and their ridiculous averages, and we always dream about having a good start and getting away fast and leaving 12 darters, and to be fair, I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe it was happening to me. It was a dream. That's what we dream of, and it was happening. And yeah, I was just, every time Johnny was throwing, I kind of expected him to, take it out. Even the last leg when I was on a double and he had 160, you see them hit those finishes all the time on TV, so I kind of expected it. And then, 3 back starts, and the first one went in, it was a dream come true.
Yeah, it's a great moment, and it's performances like that got you that invite to the World Series finals last year, another trip over to Europe to play, and lost out in a decider to Dirk van Duijvenbode. What was it like to play in front of that Dutch crowd last year and against a Dutchman? I'm guessing it was pretty difficult.
I was not prepared to be booed, that's for sure. Walking out, and as soon as my name got called, the crowd booed me, and they booed me pretty much the whole time, and my heart just didn't stop racing. Like it was like I felt like I played really bad, but I was still in the game. So I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe I played that poorly, and I was still in with a chance. I still had a match start. So Yeah, I was thinking to myself, if it wasn't for the crowd, I could have won that one.
Well, as we said, 2022 was a busy year on the hockey. We know you're a keen golfer as well, but one event away from the darts you were lined up to play in the Hopes Golf Classic at Avondale Golf Club in Christchurch, unfortunately called off due to the weather. Is there any plans to put it on this year?
I think, yeah, my wife is thinking about putting one on, but it's just hard to, with my calendar, I have literally 1 weekend off from now till the end of the year. Like, my calendar's, it's fairly packed, and I'm looking at coming back to the UK in November for, well, at least I've qualified for Lakeside, but unless I get a William Hill, then I might go a little bit later. But at this stage, I'm looking at coming back over here in November and then play Lakeside, possibly William Hill, and then stay for Q School. So, we'll try and have a Hopes Classic. I don't tend to play. I'm more likely just to have a little haggle on a hole or cook the barbecue instead of just being stuck with one group, getting to see me for the whole day rather than everybody.
No, that's fair enough. Well, let's get back to the darts then. And this year, we've seen you win a few titles on the WDF circuit. You're high up on the rankings there, and one of the highlights is it's got to be on the World Series again, beating Dimitri van der Berg, a 96 average this time, and this time in front of your home crowd in New Zealand. What did that win mean to you?
Oh, it was awesome. It's, like turning around every time after a throw and seeing familiar faces, it does hit different. You know, you're not turning around and it's strangers, you know. There's a lot of people wearing my shirts. My kids, my wife, they were in the crowd too, so I could turn around and I could see them. And it was another one just like Johnny's game. Just couldn't believe it was going in. But at the same time, I was hitting doubles when I was going for singles, and kind of lucky that I managed to fix it a couple of times. But I've been practicing throwing a little bit harder, so that's why I was going into those wrong doubles. But made it work, and I was happy with the result.
Plenty still to come this year as well. We know that the World Series finals this weekend, you're going to be involved in that. You mentioned the DPNZ qualifier coming up in a few weeks, and if you win that, you're going back to Ali Pali. We mentioned your debut without the fans there, so how special would it be to win that qualifier, get to come back to London, and this time get the full experience with the sold-out crowd at Ali Pali?
Yeah, it's at the top of the goals, that and getting a tour card. So that's the plan. That's like my whole calendar and preparation is towards that. So looking forward to giving it a crack. My game's going pretty good at the moment, so happy with that. I got the board up. Been trying to throw a little bit of darts here, and trying to get that sleeping pattern right and throw some darts, eat some food, and looking forward to this weekend.
Well, when we spoke before your Ali Pali debut, you called the tournament the William Hill. You called it there again, but we've got to say that it's now it's now the Paddy Power. So I'm guessing in your interviews, if you do make the tournament, you're going to be referring it to as the Paddy Power instead.
Well, that's not a good start, is it? I'll just call it Ali Pali, dude.
Good man. You mentioned you're already guaranteed to be in one World Championship this year at Lakeside. You'd be the fourth seed for that. You're already guaranteed to be involved in it next year as well. But you said you're planning to come over in November in the UK. Have you got any events lined up, any local opens, or maybe even the Modus League as well?
I'm looking towards Modus, but it all depends on what happens with the Ali Pali spot. Because apparently we're not allowed to play Lakeside and Ali Pali, so you're going to have to make a choice there.
Well, it's a good choice to have to make if you do get to both of them. And just lastly, before we let you go, there's still lots to look forward to this year, but what is the plan going into 2024? Is it to have that another crack at Q School? Is there anything else you've got darts-wise in the pipeline for next year?
I don't tend to do my calendar past Q School. It's whatever happens after that. I don't like to have a plan B. So plan A is Q School tour card, and then plan B is obviously unwritten. It's whatever happens there.
Fair enough. Well, Haupai, it's always a pleasure to catch up with you. Wish you all the best this weekend in Amsterdam, and fingers crossed getting to the Paddy Power at the end of the year as well.
Paddy Power, I'll remember that. Thanks, mate. Thanks for having me.
Thanks again to Haupai for joining us. Now, a look at some things away from tournament results at the weekend, tournaments that are coming up this weekend, and the PDC have released their 2024 calendar. What were your big takeaways from the announcement?
Some things that, well, the biggest thing is something that we talked about in the past and we knew would eventually happen. I've been hearing, I was hearing back in 2017, 2018 that eventually the PDC would move in this direction. And I was a bit surprised it's taken this long, but again, the pandemic obviously threw everything for a loop, and that's the move to all the Players' Championship events being midweek. The only way that I saw that not being the case at some point would be if they really just tried to squeeze a bunch of events in and do an entire week of them, and that might be the thing at some point. It might reach the point where you say that the players have to get in from Friday through to not that following Monday, but a Monday after, 11 days later. And there'll be one off day, and otherwise there'll be 7 days of Players' Championship events and 3 days of other qualifiers. I could see that eventually happening. It cuts down on the travel time. It gets a huge block of events, and it opens up a lot more of the calendar. But that's the only way I see it going back to having some weekend Players' Championship events. I'm not surprised that this move has happened, because the weekends are for other events. The weekends are for Euro Tours. And now, with all those weekends open and not an increase, at least as things currently stand, not an increase in Euro Tours. I wouldn't put it past them trying to squeeze a 14th one in there sometime. But as things currently stand, not an increase. That opens up more chances for there to be other World Series events. Maybe an event in East Asia. Maybe a return of another event in Australia. Or an event in South America or somewhere else in Europe or even Africa. There's more weekends now open. I think that's a good thing. I think it's a move that was inevitable, and I'm glad to finally see it having been affected. Beyond that, the first ever Euro Tour event in Switzerland, I think, shows that the game is continuing to grow and they're continuing to move around. I'm still surprised we haven't seen something in Spain, especially now with the increase, maybe one day in France. But I think this is now a sign that the PDC wants to move events around, and a second in Belgium, obviously, as well. I think it's a much more diverse calendar, and there's still room for there to be more added because the World Series events haven't been announced. I think it's a very good calendar. And I want to point one other thing out. I'm sure everyone realized it, but that little TBC next to the World Grand Prix in October, maybe that means it's going back to Dublin. Maybe that event is going somewhere else. We'll see. But that's, I think, something that we will maybe need to get Matt Porter on to discuss in the near future.
Well, I'd love to give you the big scoop and say that the World Grand Prix is going to be at the Reebok, the Bolton Stadium. That would be good for me, but I can't confirm that. I don't think it's going to be going there. And like you, I think it'd be great to see it go back to Ireland or go somewhere else, maybe around Europe, spread it around a little bit. I think that could be where we end up. But the biggest talking point from the announcement was the change to the Players' Championship events reverting to all midweek next year, because it is a big change. It is something that we have seen gradually coming over the years. You go back to 2019 and 9 of the 30 Players' Championships were held Monday to Friday. The next 2 years discount with the pandemic because we had the blocks of 4 or 5 events, and we were just happy to see some darts again. But 2022 it went up to 13 midweek events, and this year there's been an even split, 15 on midweek, 15 on weekends. So to go completely in one way next year feels like a big leap from the PDC, and it does free up half a dozen or so weekends for them, which you'd imagine they're going to try and fill up with something else. And whenever we've asked the PDC, we've asked Barry Hearn or Matt Porter about new events, possibly going into new countries, one of the answers that they've come back with is that they are limited to having 52 weeks, 52 weekends in the year. So the chance here to free up some of those weekends I think is going to be a good thing. It is going to mean that we are going to see more of those events, stage events played at the weekend. And of course, the other side of things, you look at it, it's a 128 player tour. Not every player is a full-time professional, and obviously one day we'd like to be at a point where we do see that, but we are going to go into next year with players that are semi-pro. They are still working, and a lot of the events that they're guaranteed in, the Players' Championships, being played all on midweeks, that's going to make things a bit more difficult, you'd imagine. They are going to have to juggle around working with the darts, playing midweek, and maybe have to work on the weekends now. So that'll be interesting to see how that has an impact on things next year. And I think the plan for the PDC is it's got to be now that every weekend that you have an event is played in front of a crowd, because when we get to the weekends, that is when you're going to see the biggest audience tuning in. Weekends, people are watching sport, whether it's football, rugby, anything like that. Darts is also on that agenda, isn't it? And I think you're going to get more of an audience watching when the darts is in front of a crowd compared to just playing in front of the cubicles, the leisure centres where it's behind closed doors. So I think that's another side of it as well, that having those weekends when you get the biggest audience, that's when you put the events on in front of a crowd. That is one of the things that does attract people to watching the darts as well. And the other thing I was going to point out as well is going to the start of the year, the Premier League is starting the day before the Masters. So we are doing away with the Masters being an unofficial Premier League playoff, if you like it has been the last 2 years. Johnny Clayton, Chris Dobey winning the Masters to get in the Premier League. Now we are going back, you'd think, to getting that lineup announced after the World Championship final, because there won't really be anything else unless they put World Series events on. But you can't see that being events where you're going to push yourself into contention. So I like the fact that the Masters is a standalone event again, and we're not going to have that month extra. It's already pretty prolonged, the Premier League talk that we've had the last couple of years.
You know, I had not even thought of that fact that the Premier League is starting before the Masters this year. That hadn't even crossed my mind. I think I had so written out the format of the last 2 years, but I had not written out that idea that the Masters champ could get in. So that's a very interesting point that I completely overlooked. But we have one more question, not something we've spoken about in quite some time, since probably before the pandemic, but the DRA cases, the disciplinary cases for seasons 2021, 2022, and the first half, at least, of 2023, have been made public. I know we probably last time we talked about it was when Gerwyn Price and Gary Anderson were getting fined in the Grand Slam final. What are your thoughts on the most recent announcements?
Yeah, I was trying to think, actually, the last time that we've spoke about the DRA cases, and it's a good reason why we haven't, is because they've not been available. They only got posted out for 2021, 2022, and this year so far. I think they came out start of this week or last week, but came out quite close together. So they've been available on the website, which is good for us, to all darts fans, to be able to see what the punishments, the fines have been handed out for players that have been naughty boys or naughty girls, if you like. But the one that stands out is Bradley Phillips, the young player who breached the COVID policy on the Challenge Tour back in 2021. And we did speak about it on the show back at the time when it happened. And we put the question to Matt Porter, the PDC chief exec. He said that, if I remember rightly, that the DRA were investigating it and the player in question would be punished. And if you don't recall the incident, it was a Challenge Tour event here in the UK. The player testing positive for the virus and gave a false COVID test result, and he ended up infecting 3 PDC staff members. And it was an event where it was utter chaos. We were seeing players being pulled out of the event. It wreaked havoc with it. And Bradley, he's been handed a suspension until February 2025. So it's a big suspension that he's been handed for that. And aside from that, we've seen a lot of players getting fined, handed formal warnings for quite a few betting on darts and failing to mark. They seem to be the allegations that are the most picked up on or keep happening on numerous occasions. And there's some big names in there that have also been fined for other reasons as well. And obviously we don't like to see these incidents occur, but like I said, I think it's a good thing that we are able to see the results of these hearings, see what the punishments handed out are. And I think for the players, you know, it's important to have that transparency of what the authorities or the regulatory body covering the game does. And the page for 2023 so far, it's only 5 months in, but it's quite small so far. So I think fingers crossed for the players' wallets more than anything else, that we don't see too much more get added to it for the rest of the year.
Yeah, I had missed that these had been released until I saw it on the spreadsheet, and so I don't have much more to add that you didn't. I think the biggest thing is that there's nothing as eye-dropping that we weren't already aware of as there have been in the past. We've seen. I mean, obviously, the most high-profile one was the one that I mentioned in introducing the question between Gezi and Gary at the Grand Slam 5 years ago. But beyond that, there have been others that drew some attention. Andy Jenkins for homophobic comments being one of the famous ones from, I think, 2019. And there have been, there have been others, but nothing really jumped off. There were a few about betting on darts on here from players, mostly that were just warnings or very small fines. Some of the usual suspects in here as well. Mervyn King getting a warning, Steve West getting a fine, Mensur Suljovic, I think only a failure to mark on Mensur. But like some players that, they have a history, Gezi having quite a few in here as well, but nothing as high profile. The big one was the one we already knew about, the one you talked about the Challenge Tour player who faked the COVID test, who was rightfully dealt with and dealt harshly with. But beyond that, maybe this is a sign that overall the players are becoming more professional. I think the PDC has tried their hardest to make this a truly professional environment and a professional tour, and to weed out people who don't take it, if not fully seriously, at least professionally. And overall, that seems to have worked. Most of these, everyone's human. Things are going to happen. And most of these are minor things, minor comments or a failure to mark, recklessly throwing darts, and therefore are unnoteworthy, other than the fact that it's noteworthy. That's all that there is here. I think that's a good thing, and that's my big takeaway from this. Anything else for this week?
Well, as always, we have to say thank you to our guests for joining us, to Daniel and Haupai for their time, and best of luck to the both of them in the World Series this weekend. A big thank you to our friends at Darts Corner. Go and check them out. The world's #1 online darts retailer, shipping to the UK, Europe, America, beyond. A huge range of darts and other products on their site. So go and give them a look and support them. And thanks to everyone for listening. Thanks for the continued support. Next week, I'm going to be in London, heading back to the big city life for me, for the Target launch. I'm looking forward to that. And I'm told there is a chance to grab a chat with some of the players. So fingers crossed we'll be able to get some interviews for you. And I've been informed as well that Target are hoping to have all their players there. So lots of players to possibly chat to. So if there's a player on that list that's sponsored by Target that you want to hear from, then do let us know. That's on Tuesday night next week. So you've got a few days to get in touch with us before we go. So do let us know. And yeah, I think that's everything. So the only thing left actually for me to say is enjoy the darts.
I didn't see that saying coming. No, I hope you enjoy the darts, and I hope you enjoy the Target launch. Thanks to all of our listeners this week. It's good to be back after missing last week's show. Lots of tungsten coming forward. As you guys already know, we have the World Series final this week. We still have a couple more Euro Tours this month as we lead into the World Grand Prix in Leicester. Who knows where it'll be next year, and a bunch of other televised events for the rest of the year. So let us know who you want on, anything you want us to talk about. Get your questions in. I'll leave it the way that I always leave it, with hang tight.